In the frozen silence of the Arctic, a secret route once linked to unlikely allies, from Fairbanks, Alaska, to Siberia's cold plains. Planes carried hope through blizzards. This was the ALSIB route, Alaska-Siberia, a lifeline few ever heard of. Over 8,000 American aircraft made this perilous crossing between 1942 and 1945. It wasn't a battlefront, but a bridge of survival and cooperation. Each flight represented trust in a world ripped apart by war. Pilots faced not only enemy forces, but the wrath of nature itself. Whiteouts, magnetic storms, and deadly cold claimed dozens of lives, and yet they flew for a cause greater than fear. The skies above the Arctic became an invisible corridor of courage. America's factories built the planes, Soviet hands would fly them to war. This was the hidden artery that helped defeat the Axis. The route was born out of necessity, not convenience. In 1941, Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union changed everything. The US and USSR, once ideological rivals, became uneasy allies. Under the Lend-Lease program, America promised planes, tanks, and supplies, but shipping by sea was perilous. German submarines prowled every route. So, planners sought a backdoor across the top of the world. From Great Falls, Montana, to Fairbanks, Alaska, and then into Siberia. A 6,000-mile aerial chain linking American production to the Eastern Front. It was a logistical miracle few believed could work. Yet within a year, the route was operational and heavily guarded. Pilots called it the world's coldest delivery route, and history nearly forgot it even existed. They weren't ordinary pilots. They were ice warriors, civilian flyers, military airmen, and adventurers answered the call. Many came from the U.S. Army Air Force's Air Transport Command. Their mission: ferry brand new aircraft to Soviet airbases in Siberia. The planes included P-39, Airacobra, A-20 Havocs, and C-47 transports. Each was freshly painted with red stars before crossing the border. American crews flew to Nome. Soviets took over from there. But training was brief, and mistakes in the Arctic meant death. Engines froze mid-air, instruments malfunctioned, and visibility vanished. Yet camaraderie grew between the two nations in the bitter cold. For many, it was their first encounter with Soviet comrades, and their cooperation foreshadowed the alliance that turned the war. Every journey began at Great Falls, Montana. The town transformed overnight into a bustling military hub. Factories repaired and refitted aircraft for Arctic conditions. Engines were winterized, fuselages insulated, and survival gear added. From there, pilots followed a string of airfields northward: Edmonton, Whitehorse, Northway, and Fairbanks, each a frozen outpost. Mechanics worked around the clock in sub-zero hangars. Winds howled outside, rattling steel walls and metal wings. But the system worked, a human chain through the wilderness. Each station passed aircraft forward like runners in a relay. By the time they reached Alaska, the P lanes were ready for handoff. The next stop, Soviet territory. Nome, Alaska, the final American checkpoint before the unknown. Here, U.S. pilots handed over the aircraft to Soviet crews. The Soviets arrived through treacherous Arctic passages, often on sleds. Communication was broken, but respect spoke louder than words. They checked controls, loaded maps, and prepared for the deadly flight. From Nome, they would cross the Bering Strait into Siberia. The narrow ocean channel hid storms that rose without warning. Icy fog could swallow entire squadrons in minutes. One wrong turn meant being lost forever in white nothingness. And yet, flight after flight, they made the journey, a silent procession across the roof of the world. Each plane carried not just metal, but trust. When they landed in Siberia, it was like touching another planet. Yakutsk, Kyrynsk, Krasnoyarsk, isolated stations buried in snow. Temperatures dropped to -50 C, freezing oil and skin alike. Soviet mechanics lit fires under wings to thaw engines. Shelters were little more than wooden shacks in vast emptiness. Yet spirits remained unbroken. Survival was the only goal. Women worked alongside men, keeping airfields alive. Each aircraft delivered here would soon head west to war, toward Stalingrad, Leningrad, and the heart of Nazi lines. The pilots seldom knew where their planes would fight, but they knew they mattered. They were part of something vast and invisible. The aircraft themselves told stories of ingenuity. P-39 Airacobra became Soviet favorites for low-altitude combat. A-20 Havocs bombed German supply lines relentlessly. C-47s brought troops and aid through broken landscapes. Each type had to endure temperatures it was never designed for. Hydraulic fluid thickened, rubber cracked, wings iced over. Pilots learned to warm fuel with engine heat before takeoff, and they improvised endlessly, sometimes with wood and wire. Despite the challenges, aircraft delivery rates soared. By 1944, hundreds arrived monthly without loss. It proved the unthinkable. Cooperation across frozen skies worked. The Arctic had become a lifeline of steel and frost. Behind the scenes, women played crucial roles. In Fairbanks, female radio operators kept constant contact. Soviet women flew as navigators and mechanics along the route. They endured the same dangers: frostbite, crashes, exhaustion. Their discipline inspired both American and Soviet men. Photographs show them in parkas, headphones, and courage. They tracked aircraft through static-filled channels day and night. When a plane went missing, they organized rescue flights. Some never returned, their sacrifice seldom recorded. Yet their voices guided hundreds through darkness and ice. Without them, the ALSIB route would have collapsed. They were the unseen guardians of the Arctic sky. Not all flights made it through. Whiteout storms swallowed planes without warning. Mountains in Siberia rose unseen beneath cloud cover. Dozens of aircraft vanished, never to be found. Even today, wrecks are discovered frozen in tundra ice. Survivors told tales of crawling for miles through blizzards. Some built fires from wreckage, others simply froze where they fell. There were no enemy guns here, just the enemy of nature. Memorials now mark the crash sites across Alaska and Yakutia. Each one tells of bravery far from any battlefield. These men fought death without firing a shot, and they did it to keep the lifeline alive. The cooperation came with mistrust and secrecy. Both nations shared planes but guarded information fiercely. American crews rarely saw where the aircraft went next. Soviets offered little detail about their destinations. Each side feared espionage, even while depending on the other. Yet, the route remained remarkably secure and efficient. Soviet pilots took pride in mastering American machines. They studied manuals by candlelight in frozen barracks. Engineers exchanged notes in broken English and Russian. The Arctic became a classroom for wartime diplomacy. For a brief moment, ideology bowed to necessity, and humanity flew higher than politics. As 1943 arrived, the tide of war began to shift. Planes from Alaska now supported Soviet offensives in Europe. They strafed German tanks, guarded convoys, and bombed key bridges. Every successful mission carried the echo of Alaska's wind. The ALSIB route had quietly strengthened the Eastern Front. Without it, the Red Army might have fought with half its air power. The U.S. factories in Detroit and California were part of this victory, a supply chain stretching from the Pacific to the Volga River. Even as Stalin distrusted Roosevelt, the skies connected them. Each flight was a handshake above frozen clouds. It was the sound of cooperation in the language of engines, and it helped bring Nazi Germany to its knees. When the war ended, few medals were awarded for ALSIB. The route remained classified for years during the Cold War. Veterans grew old with memories no one asked about. They remembered the silence of the Arctic and the roar of engines. The world celebrated D-Day and the Pacific victories, not them. Yet, they had made victory possible from behind the scenes. It was history's quiet chapter, buried in ice and loyalty. Only decades later did historians uncover its full scale. Memorials were built in Alaska, Yakutsk, and Moscow, and names of fallen pilots were carved in stone. They were the forgotten bridge between two worlds. Their legacy still whispers through the northern winds. In the 1990s, explorers began retracing the old ALSIB route. They uncovered wrecks preserved perfectly in permafrost. Flight logs, uniforms, and letters still lay inside cockpits. Local villagers guided researchers to forgotten crash sites. For them, These wrecks were sacred relics of Alliance. Museums in Alaska and Siberia now preserve this hidden story. Documentaries and archives have started giving it voice. What was once top secret is now a tale of unity. Even in the coldest war, warmth had once existed, and through memory, that warmth endures. History, like ice, eventually melts to reveal its truth, and the truth of ALSIB is one of shared courage. The ALSIB route was more than logistics, it was human spirit. It showed what nations could achieve when survival outweighed rivalry. In frozen silence, friendship was forged through endurance. Each aircraft was a testament to cooperation under pressure. It reminds us that even enemies can unite against darkness. The Arctic storms could not freeze that truth. Technology may change, but courage never does. Pilots who once braved these skies remain symbols of resilience. They connected continents not with politics, but with trust. The route stands as a blueprint for peace through effort. In every engine's echo, their unity still flies, and the world still owes them remembrance. Today, the winds still whisper over Fairbanks and Yakutsk. Old runways lie buried beneath snow, but the past is never gone. Historians call it the route of memory, a path between hearts. It links Alaska's open skies to Siberia's eternal frost, and between them, a bridge of courage and cooperation. The ALSIB route may be forgotten by many, but not by history. For every plane that crossed those skies carried more than metal. It carried the weight of trust in a fragile alliance, a secret route. Yes, but not one lost to time. Because in every snowflake that falls on the Arctic, the spirit of those pilots still flies unseen, and their legacy remains silent but eternal.